He gave it a thumbs up, right? Well, I don't know. That's the thing. Maybe you go through the website or something. Okay. Yep. All right. I'd like to call this Planning Board public meeting to order. It's Tuesday, September 21, 2021. This is Village Hall Courtroom. It's approximately 7:37 right now. Diane?
In accordance with the provisions of Section 10:4/8D of the Open Public Meetings Act, the date, location, and time of the commencement of this meeting is reflected in a meeting notice, a copy of which schedule has been filed with the village manager and the village clerk, the Ridgewood News, and the Record newspapers, and posted on the bulletin board in the entry lobby of the village municipal offices at 131 North Maple Avenue, and on the village website, all in accordance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act.
Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Jane.
Mayor Knudsen? Mayor Knudsen?
Here.
Chief McGuire?
Here.
Councilwoman Reynolds?
Here.
Mr. Joel?
Here.
Ms. O'Brien?
Here.
Ms. Materi?
Here.
Ms. Huban?
Here.
Ms. Bartow?
Here.
Ms. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. Lebarski?
Here.
Mr. Allegra?
Here.
All right, 100% attendance. That's nice. Good start. All right, first order of business. If anyone did not sign in at the door, Rashana was taking names down and information. It's so you can be put on a list, get information regarding the master plan. All right, public comments on topics not pending before the board. If anyone has any comment, they can come up to the lectern, state their name and address, and make a comment.
Hello, I'm
Hello.
Nancy Brennan Hill, 136 Doremus Avenue, Ridgewood, New Jersey. I've lived in Ridgewood for 70 years. My family came here in 1929. And the reason I mention this is, for most of the time that I've lived here, I can tell you that Ridgewood had a real shade tree department. By real, I mean that it cut down trees, it replaced trees that were damaged, it had a budget, it had people in charge, and somewhere along the line things shifted, maybe a decade ago, maybe a little bit longer. So now we're in the position of being down about 3,000 village shade trees, according to the inventory that was done about a year ago. So I'd like to know, in view of global warming, who's going to take responsibility to remedy this situation? I don't think it's enough anymore to have envisioning meetings and let people stand up and say how important trees are to them, and then find out that, for instance, this fall there will be no trees planted. It's just not acceptable any longer with global warming. Planting trees is the cheapest way to fight global warming. So I'm looking to every person here to take responsibility and to come up with a plan so that we don't pass another fall without trees being planted, so that we don't have trees that go down and are no longer replaced, so that we don't work on the backlog of 3,000 trees. Thank you, friends.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to make a public comment?
Rorick Hollaby, 1 Franklin Avenue. I assume every one of you has been vaccinated and you've waited the right period since your second vaccination. If you have not, put on a mask. Have you all been vaccinated? Because I'm 81 years old with a lung condition. I don't want to be subjected to someone being too lackadaisical about wearing a mask. This is one. Secondly, the beginning of the summary of master plan talks about a master plan is a long-range guidance document that sets forth values, principles, goals, priorities, policies, and recommendations for making decisions about the future of a community. There is nothing in this that talks about governance. How do you get people to participate in the government? How do you put checks and balances on people going crazy as they seek power at any cost? I think it's critical that we cover governance, if you will, as part of a master plan. My other point has to do with the designation of a town we live in as the village. I hate to say this, but Ridgewood, out of 500 municipalities in New Jersey, is the 100th largest. We have a population of 25,000. We have a budget between municipality and the schools of about $170 million. That is no village. And when I see things about maintaining the quality of the village life, and when we see the listing, how the town has developed over the years, and now how we refer to it as the historic village of Ridgewood. I mean, it's a joke. We have a lot of history. We should be aware of that. We should maintain that. We should protect that. But this idea of saying, oh, the historic village of Ridgewood, I mean, it's a scam. It's a sham, if you will, especially when people who are in power show no respect for the tradition and some of the history of the village, including paving over a historic pocket park next to the train station. So I urge you, one, to do something about governance, and secondly, to do something about this romantic notion that we live in a village, which we do not. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else that wants to make public comments?
Hi, my name is Amanda Pye, and I'm at 690 Ellington Road. I'm here because a few years ago there was an ordinance from a zoning perspective which said that you could have 5 feet of covered open air up to 150 square feet, which in essence is a porch. So most people would like a porch of some sort, have their coffee on, whatever it might be, watch their kids play in the neighborhood. Most homes in Ridgewood don't necessarily meet all the setbacks and guidance, and I know it is from a financial perspective to have variances and so forth for the town. However, it's also a burden because, as I'm sure you're all aware of, the town is completely backed up, with retiring and other resigning issues, and not the building department, and not being able to keep up in a timely manner with everything. So they're backlogged. Obviously, that means the variance board is also backlogged, which is an issue. And I work in design, I work in construction. It's not just me, I'm also a resident, I grew up here. It's many families that are going through the same issues. And I think we need to kind of resolve and mitigate the problems that are minute so they don't take up the variance board's time. I think the zoning officer should have some sort of discretion on certain things, so I do believe that ordinance should be put back. And then I also believe that the zoning officer should have discretion of like maybe a 1 foot difference or 2 foot difference in whichever direction, because it will help to, keep things flowing and not backlog the building department as well as the variance board. So that's my first thing. My second thing I would like to say, I was on the Board of Ed meeting last night, and I noticed I was able to call in. So I'm not sure if that's something that can be addressed. I do know that there's obviously elderly people in our community, disabled people, as well as just people that might have, a busy life, a work schedule, maybe commuting back from the city, or whatever might be. From a transparency perspective, I do like to, urge you to consider putting back on some sort of Zoom call or call in for people to have that option. People have a lot of needs. We are still in a pandemic, and childcare is an issue for people, and working families and just regular people need to be able to have an option to be a part of the town planning without having to physically be here. It is 2021, and I would like that to be considered and brought back into, the forum, if you will. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Okay, I'll move on. Do we have any committee, commission, or professional updates to my right?
I'll only.
I was going to say,
you go first.
I'll go first.
You're the chief.
We had a spec meeting today. Above Town and Country, T-Mobile wants to put a generator up there. They have antennas already, and there's a platform up there, and they want to put the generator on the platform. But the plans they gave us didn't really show how they were going to do it, how they were going to put the railing, how it would be serviced, how it would look from the street. There was a bunch of questions we had, and this was the second meeting without them sending a representative. So we voted to send it to the full planning board. So it'll be coming here to be discussed.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Yeah, sure.
Great. Historic Preservation Commission should be reconvening in October. That will relieve this planning board of any historic preservation applications for review, and we look forward to meeting with our newly formed commission, and I think Jane will be sending out, and any applications will be sent out with that. So we look forward to our new Historic Preservation Commission. As many, or everyone up here knows, that as a result of COVID in 2020, some reappointments weren't made. It resulted in a lack of a quorum, and we've resolved that, remedied that issue, and we have a whole new slate, almost a new slate, but our favorite, Joe Saplicki, chairman for a long time, will be returning, and so we're really excited about that. Thank you.
Any updates to my left?
No real updates, but the Open Space Committee is going to reconvene this Thursday at the Staple for, I'm sorry, did you catch that? The Open Space Committee is going to start their meetings up again. We were off for the summer. The meeting will be this Thursday, the 23rd, 7 o'clock at the Staple. Public is welcome to join. Okay?
Okay, thanks. Jane, any correspondence received? No? All right. Our next item on the agenda will be Maureen McTeague, 142 Kenilworth Road, Block 4202, Lot 15. Adoption of memorializing resolution of approval for minor subdivision approval and related variance relief. Okay, did everyone have a chance to review this? And whoever voted for it is eligible to make a motion and vote on it.
So I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution memorializing the approval of minor subdivision for McTeague at 142 Kenilworth Road, Block 4202, Lot 15, as submitted.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Go ahead.
Okay, Darlene's the second. Call the roll.
Mayor Newton,
Yes.
Chief Gore,
Yes.
Councilwoman Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Joe,
Yes.
Ms. Huban,
Yes.
Ms. Bartow,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
and Mr. Lebarsky.
Yes.
Okay, the resolution's approved as written. Okay, our next item on the agenda is Phase 2 Master Plan Public Meeting. And we're going to start off with the subcommittee, just giving a few words on the Phase 2 Master Plan. I guess we'll start with Melanie.
Thank you. So as a lifelong Ridgewood resident, I take a lot of pride in having been able to be a part of this subcommittee since about 2018.
It's been interesting and rewarding, and we've learned a lot. And we hope our fellow residents will enjoy giving their input, and we're very much looking forward to what they have to say and participating in making Ridgewood and keeping Ridgewood a viable and thriving, sustainable community moving ahead.
So I jumped into the process a little bit later than everyone else on the subcommittee, but I also have several different perspectives as a lifelong resident growing up here as a child and coming back and raising my kids here. I'm also a professional planner, and so I've really enjoyed being involved in the process. Our team will be introduced soon. They're going to be great to steer the ship, and I'm also really looking forward to the community conversation we want to have here tonight.
Thank you. I actually have to say I am moved tonight to see everyone here. I am feeling almost overwhelmed to see this room full of fellow residents who've participated in this process. This is emotional for me. In 2014, when I was first elected, I told the chairman I wasn't going to start with my 2014 election, though we didn't have a whole story here. But at that time, we recognized the need for an updated master plan. And I think only the chairman and myself, I don't know that Debbie was here at the time, but he and I would be the last two remaining members of the 2015-16 Planning Board that actually did the reexamination report, which had, if I recall, 186 action items that needed to be corrected in a master plan that was close to 40 years old. So getting here today and being a part of this is an amazing experience. I'm so grateful to our community for all the community outreach, for the community engagement, for the input, and for the confidence in this planning board and this subcommittee moving forward. I am truly grateful for the professionals, our professional planners and staff engineer, and for the NV5 and higher Gould that's been here every step of the way with us. And I just think we will be truly blessed because we will be leaving a Ridgewood for future generations to live in, to love, to enjoy, to grow, to work, to experience. We'll all be gone, but many people will appreciate this monumental effort. So I do want to take the time to thank Chairman Richard Joel, just a friend and colleague, Ms. O'Brien, who's been amazing, and she's going to be working on our historic preservation element, and Melanie Huban, who has been put in a tireless effort getting this done as well. And I also want to thank my council colleagues every step of the way, and Bob Rooney, our CFO, who worked with me hand in hand to make sure that we got the funding in place to get this done. So, you know, I heard just one last thought. And during the public comment, somebody said, where's the governance? Where's the participation? Where are the people? Where's the transparency? All those little words that get popped in there. You're all right here tonight, and you should be giving yourselves a pat on the back and a round of applause for being here. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm a 25-year resident, and I've been on the planning board for over 10 years. And nothing like 70 years. That's very impressive. And I think it's a testament to the village. I think there's a lot of great people here that contribute time and take a real interest, very intelligent community. And we've had a master plan that was kind of like a patchwork for a number of years. I mean, it was just old, outdated, disjointed, many different booklets and updates that you had, so you didn't have really one resource that was current to go to. But now we've just kind of solidified things and are really coming to kind of a very important point where we're going to have a whole master plan that's comprehensive. And it is exciting to have, and I think a community like this deserves that, and I think it's a good testament to all the hours and effort put in by the board and by the subcommittee and by the community. The community participated in this and gave a lot of input. So it's all very exciting, and it's still ongoing. So we're going to keep going to the end till we have a finished product on this. So, stay involved and keep pushing it along, and we'll get there to the end. So I'm going to introduce, there's two entities that are involved in this. It's Higher Gruel and Associates and NV5. So from Higher Gruel and Associates, we have John Berry and Mckinley Mertz. And from NV5, we have Annette Schultz and Roshana Sheff. So I'll turn it over to you, John.
There we go. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. Good evening. I'm John Barry. I'm a principal planner with Higher Gruel and Associates. My firm works all over the state. We work in communities large and small. We work City of Newark, so the biggest municipality in the state. We work for Corbin City down in Atlantic County, population 400 something. So we span the wide variety geographically in terms of the size of communities, in terms of different people's backgrounds and ways of life. So we're excited to be here in Ridgewood. This is a beautiful town, and there's a lot going for it. So I think that we're starting from a place of incredible strength. My personal experience, I've been working as a professional planner for about 10 and a half, 11 years now. I have a background in municipal work. I worked for Middletown Township in Monmouth County for several years, and then moved over to the private sector, where I've been with Higher Gruel and kind of moving up the ranks in the firm over the last 5 or 6 years. The master plan process is an exciting one. It's an engaging one, especially when we have residents come out like you have this evening, and hopefully folks who are watching at home will be able to participate and chime in as well. The board, the subcommittee has been incredibly supportive so far. We've had have some great conversations and good communication, and look forward to making this process a good one for everyone, that you end up with a product that you're proud of, and that Ridgewood has something to build its foundation on moving forward. I'll introduce my colleague, Mckinley Mertz.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mckinley Mertz. I'm also a principal with Higher Gruel and Associates, and I have a background in architecture. So my previous life I did that, and have been working at Higher Gruel for about 6.5 years now. I switched from architecture to planning because of nights like tonight, where we get community, resident, business turnout and have really great dialogue about what you want to see in your community. That experience I just didn't quite get with the architectural world, and it's been very fulfilling in this world. From a personal standpoint, my dad grew up in Ridgewood. My grandparents lived here until 2002, so I also grew up coming here in the 90s. Van Dyke's was a Saturday night ritual, the movie theater, so I have a lot of roots here as well, and it's great to be back. Walking down the downtown today, there was a lot that I recognized, there was a lot that I didn't recognize, so it's great to see this community after not having been back for almost 20 years. So I'm very excited. This is great to have you all here, and we're looking forward to moving through this process together. And with that, I'm going to introduce our NV5 colleagues over here.
Hi. My name is Annette Schultz, and I'm a supervising planner with NV5. And NV5 is actually an international company, and we do all kinds of engineering, a lot of different things. But our group, and Rachna is one of them, we have a small group out of Parsippany, and we have worked all over the Mid-Atlantic region, mostly on transportation planning, although we've covered other things as well. And before I was with NV5, I was with RBA. NV5 bought RBA. So I've been working for 25 years with the same group of people. There have been changes, but we have a very strong firm with a lot of local knowledge. We work a lot in New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, but mostly New Jersey in our group. I wanted to say that our specialty is really active transportation. We do a lot of walking and biking planning for facilities and design for trails, for greenways. We've worked on scenic byways. We've done a lot of really fun work. Frankly, I feel fortunate because the kind of work that we do is often, people get really excited about it. They love trails, they love to bike. We get a lot of, it's really fulfilling for me, and I've really enjoyed working even here with some of you I recognize from meetings that I attended in the visioning process, because I was also involved in the first phase of the master plan effort. So I'm looking forward to further discussion and really diving deep into the specifics of what recommendations and strategies we can come up with. We've got a really great portrait of what kinds of issues so we're starting out based on the findings of the vision plan, so it's really great to be here. I thank you for selecting us to help you with this effort.
Thanks, Annette. Hi, I'm Rachna Sheth. I work at NV5. I'm a senior planner and urban designer. I also have a background in architecture, and personally for me, I wanted my work to have more of a social impact and help the community, and so that's how I transitioned into planning, community planning, and I really enjoyed this part of my job. I work, as Annette mentioned, primarily in transportation planning. We do a lot of bicycle and pedestrian plans, master plans, trail planning, and we like to think that we make the streets safe for people to walk, bike, go in a wheelchair, use a stroller, do anything. And that's what I really enjoy about my job. And thank you for selecting us, and I look forward to making Ridgewood a better place to walk and bike. Thanks.
Thank you. So this evening we've introduced ourselves. We're going to go through a presentation to discuss some of the elements of the master plan and how we're moving this process forward from the work that's already been done with the vision planning. We are not trying to recreate that effort. That's been a valuable part of this process. If we were starting from scratch, the first thing we would do is go through a process like you've already undertaken. So that's why we're referring to this as phase 2. We are getting down to the brass tacks of drafting the master plan elements. There are certain legal requirements that we'll touch on briefly, hopefully without putting anyone to sleep, but then also talk about the process that we hope to engage with you on and the kinds of comments, questions, input that we're looking forward to hearing. We already got a couple in our preamble here, so more of that, please. We'll talk about the takeaways and objectives, some of the specific things that we've learned from the vision plan process, and highlight some of the things that we're going to continue to drill down on. And as I said, go through the different elements. I'll be talking about the land use element, which is the big picture foundation for zoning and for land use decision making. And Annette and Rachna will be talking about circulation and transportation, in case you didn't guess from their opens and their specialties. We'll be talking a little bit about a downtown economic development plan, and then green building, sustainability, and a few other ancillary elements. So here we are in phase 2. Now we've got the foundation of the vision plan. We have a wonderful website that began as the vision plan website and has now made a transition to the ridgewoodvillegem.org address. It's the old address works as well, but we wanted to give the site a new address to reflect the fact that we're on to the next phase of the process. The information from the vision plan remains on the website, and we're going to be working to provide regular updates. You can sign up through the website, provide your contact information, and receive those updates when they're made. We also have some small comment cards up at the front table over here if anybody would like to leave a handwritten comment this evening. Those comment cards also have a QR code you can scan with your phone to access the website, so hopefully there's some easy ways for anybody who hasn't gotten to the website yet to find their way. And we also have an Instagram account that we've been updating with posts, and the name of that is Vision Ridgewood. So that's still the I told her I was confused before we started, and I am. Sorry. So the Instagram account remains Vision Ridgewood, so you can look that up on Instagram, and we'll be continuing to post regularly on that account. So this is the first of 4 planning board work sessions that we'll be holding. We want to engage as much as possible and hopefully have people come out and be interested in what we're working on. We value transparency in our efforts. We want to provide the updates along the way. We want to show you where we're going and not just show up at the end and say, here it is, it's been decided. So we want to hear from you, and hopefully over the next several months we'll continue to have a great turnout like we did tonight, and we'll get into more specifics as we go along in each of the sessions. We'll be moving we'll have our behind-the-scenes work where we prepare existing conditions, we prepare maps, we prepare graphics, we get into the recently released demographics from the new census to see if there's been any appreciable changes to the village's demographics on those fronts, and we'll be looking at some of the transportation background information and just doing a thorough review of all the previous recommendations, a look at the activity that the town's boards have been undertaking, the different committees, but also planning board and zoning board. We had a comment about different issues related to porches. Those are the kinds of specific recommendations that may come out of this process, so we'll be looking at some of the records of the variance applications. If the same thing comes up over and over again, maybe it's something that needs to be addressed. So that's an example of the kinds of recommendations that may come out of this process that will hopefully lead to some positive changes. And then after we've drafted the plan and come up with the different elements, there will be a public hearing, which is required by law. The municipal land use law requires the board to hold a noticed public hearing and hear comments, questions from any interested parties. Hopefully, by the time we get to that point, everyone who has been engaged with us all along the way will have had their voices heard and will be thrilled with the product and love how it's turned out. And it'll be a happy meeting where we can all pat ourselves on the back for a job well done. So the master plan is set forth in the municipal land use law, which authorizes towns to put zoning into place and a whole host of other things. It contains elements. It consists of a variety of elements. The land use element is the main required element that we'll be working with as part of this process. And then there are a number of optional elements. The other required element is, essentially required at this point, is the housing element, which the town has already undertaken elsewhere, and we won't be touching that in any way because it's been vetted by the courts, but we will certainly align the land use element with that as we move forward. We'll also be looking at circulation, as I mentioned, the downtown and economic development element, sustainability element, and then smaller elements are community facilities, recycling, utilities. Those are inventory of existing conditions, recommendations for some potential future improvements, but they tend to be fairly small on their own. There's 2 other elements shown in yellow up there, a little small, maybe hard to read from the back, but there's the historic preservation element that Diane O'Brien, who is an expert in historic preservation, will be taking the lead on the preparation of a lot of the information background for that. We'll be coordinating with her to help out with integrating that into the overall plan and with any other assistance that she may need, but that'll be mostly her undertaking, but we're certainly here for support on that front. And then we have the open space and recreation element. There's another consultant group that's had a lot of experience working on open space issues in Ridgewood already, the Land Conservancy, so the council thought it made sense for them to continue in that vein. So they'll be doing the open space and recreation element. We will be coordinating with them as well. In fact, we have a meeting scheduled for Monday to begin that coordination process. So we'll be making sure that that's integrated wholly into the master plan so that you end up with a cohesive, beautiful document that provides all the legal foundation, all of the recommendations, but also looks good and is a nice marketing kind of document for the village. So that somebody says, what's Ridgewood all about? You can say, take a look at this. And there's beautiful pictures and graphs and images and all sorts of things that reflect well on the town and provide the information in a user-friendly way. So as I said, the land use element is the big foundation of the master plan in a lot of ways. It weaves in and out of all the different elements. And one of the nice things about doing this process all at once in a cohesive way like we are now, as opposed to piecemeal elements over time, is that there is a ton of overlap and interaction between the different elements. So if you do one element in a silo, now all of a sudden you have issues with how it relates to an element that may have been done 10 years ago when things were completely different. So getting to do this all at once is a great approach, a great comprehensive way of doing it. So we look at the relationship between land use and other elements. We look at natural features in town. There's topography, soil, floodplains, woodlands, things like that. Ridgewood is, of course, largely built out at this point, but there are still open natural areas, and there are significant topographical features, and there are significant wetlands and flood hazard area features that we need to be cognizant of. Existing and proposed land uses. So we have the existing zoning that's in place. We have a pattern of land use. We look at if there's a mismatch. Are there properties that were zoned years ago for certain standards, and now the built environment has changed in such a way that those standards don't make sense anymore, and it's creating issues, driving everybody to the zoning board for small things. We look at those kinds of interactions between what's built and what the zoning map, what the rules say should be there, to see if there are inconsistencies, recommendations for things that might have to change. Then some more recent additions to the land use element are things related to sustainability, resiliency, climate change assessment. We have to consider electric vehicle charging. I know that's a topic of interest to some people, and as we have more and more maturation in the electric vehicle market, we see them more and more on the road. So that's become a required consideration in a land use element. Storm resiliency. We unfortunately have a very recent example of yet another flooding event that folks all over have had to deal with, and we have to take a look at that. If we're going to talk about the future and looking toward how to make Ridgewood a sustainable and resilient place, we have to take into account the realistic flooding events that continue to happen. Environmental sustainability, which we'll have addressed both in the land use element, in the circulation element, and also in its own standalone element. But there'll be numerous concepts. The planning world, I think it's safe to say, over the last at least probably decade or more, sustainability is pretty much at the forefront of every topic that you hear about. So there's all sorts of ideas out there, and we'll try and bring a number of recommendations to the table and get your thoughts and input on how they work for Ridgewood. And then the most recent change to the land use element is the requirement to do a climate change assessment. Climate change assessment, there's a whole list of things that go into it. There's data provided by the state that will help us undertake that process, but it plays into that resiliency and sustainability mindset that something we've been trying to do as a matter of course in our practice, but now has been legislated into the requirements. So from the vision plan, we heard a few general big picture concepts that'll be guiding us as we get into the specifics. We have regardless of how we may feel about the village name, this is the village of Ridgewood, and we have the general goal of keeping a small town and village feel. We have the goal of being proactive in community planning matters. So it's the point of this process is to be proactive. We want to provide a roadmap. We want to provide a foundation for the future. We want to try and address or be prepared to address things as they come up, rather than always being reactive and behind the curve. We want to plan for the needs of current and future residents. Some of the more specific recommendations get into considering how there are different approaches to providing housing in town, what different forms of housing may be appropriate. I know we've had some new developments downtown as part of the housing plan, but what other ways can we make housing options available to people? Are accessory dwelling units appropriate in town? I don't know. We'll talk about it. What other diversity of housing types may be appropriate that we haven't thought of or aren't here today that may be desirable? How can people age in place in their town? How can young families get started in town? We want to think about the whole spectrum of housing types. What may be attractive to some of us may not be attractive to others, but we have to understand that there is a desire and a need for all different housing for all different people. What are some of the things we see downtown that we'd like to build on, that we'd like to change? We'll have a whole element that focuses on downtown and on economic development, but with that, it needs to tie into land use as well. Are some of the issues that may lead to certain blocks doing better than others, are they related to zoning? There's a whole patchwork of zoning districts downtown. If you walk downtown, you may not realize it, but if you look at the zoning map, it's like kind of an odd quilt, but there are a number of different zoning districts. So is it something that needs to be simplified, modified? That's something we're going to take a look at. One of the topics that came up is how to address the impacts of teardowns of existing homes and new construction. This is a topic that we have come across in several other towns, and I think that when something that you see all the time goes away and is replaced by something much larger, much newer, different from what was there before, it can be a startling thing. So how do we look at the zoning as a tool to regulate the types of new development that happen in a way that balances the needs of Ridgewood, the needs of families and people coming into the town and people moving around the town? So we'll take a look at those kinds of standards. And then looking at the assessment of impacts of new development, and that plays into the climate change assessment that I talked about previously. There's a lot of different demographic implications, and there's different physical implications, so we'll be continuing to look at that. And then finally, reducing impervious surfaces, which play into the flood management, that continuing to manage rainwater, stormwater, when both on-site in public spaces, looking at all the different tools that are available to us to help regulate some of those issues. So the specific components will be a review of the vision plan. There'll be recommendations, goals, and objectives. There will be existing conditions mapping, future conditions proposals, and there'll be recommendations that get it down to very specifics in terms of changes that may be needed to specific ordinances in town. So that'll be the rundown of what the land use element looks like when it's done, and it will include all the required components by law, the climate change assessment, and everything else. And with that, I'm going to pass it along to Annette to get into the circulation element.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay. The circulation element is optional according to the municipal land use law, but it actually has a huge impact on all of the other elements and also on our lives, because every day we have to deal with transportation and connectivity to get to the places we care about. So it is a really important one, and it has a lot of overlap with land use because it is through the transportation infrastructure that we access public destinations. So the relationship between circulation and other elements there's a lot, and we'll be working closely together to make sure that we're complementing each other on our recommendations and solving problems together. Because it is great that you're doing this all at the same time, because that synergy is going to make a difference in, I think, the value of the kinds of strategies that we're going to come up with. Another thing that we're going to be doing is looking at all the location and types of facilities for all the modes of transportation. I just put a list on the right, all the modes of transportation. We're not only interested in moving people, but also with moving goods. So we are going to be talking about all the modes that are appropriate for Ridgewood, and you may not have a lot of planes, but anything that comes up, anything that has to do with a means of getting around, we're going to be taking a look at. So when we look at the existing and proposed transportation facilities, we're going to be inventorying them. Is this too far away now?
Thank you.
Sorry, it's heavy. The idea is that we're looking at how people are moving around now and also what the trends are. Where are we going in the future? Master planning is supposed to be having a long view of what's happening, and the world of transportation is really changing a lot. There's lots of new innovative ways. Well, we'll be talking about that a little bit later, but basically these are all the required elements. I mean, the requirements of what needs to be included in the circulation plan. However, what I wanted to say is that we are going to be considering a wide range of things, and we're hoping to build on some of the plans that have happened before. Like, for example, NV5 worked in 2014 to do a bicycle and pedestrian set of plans for central Bergen County, and it included a pretty comprehensive, detailed look at all of the ways that we can improve walking and biking here and mitigate some of the issues that have to do with speeding, parking, traffic, so forth. So that was a project that was in 2014, and we will be picking it up again and seeing whether there are new ideas that we can bring forth to satisfy some of the recommendations there, see what's happening now with the people that are responsive to our outreach. So the general vision plan recommendations, the general concepts really have to do with figuring out ways to reduce congestion, reduce the need for parking, and to make it safer for people to walk, bike, or use electric bikes or any of the future autonomous vehicles. How are they going to fit in? All of that and transit are part of making this a walkable and bikeable city and a pleasant place that doesn't have all the issues that came up during the conversations about speeding and difficulties downtown. We're going to be working on a specific focus on the downtown. As you know, that's one of the elements that we're going to be collaborating with HCA. Specific recommendations that came out of the vision plan are looking at technology trends and innovations, and that was the goal of reducing the number of trips by personal vehicles and reduce parking demand. We have online commerce and residential commercial delivery issues. That's happening all over, especially since the pandemic. Lots of people are ordering lots of things from the internet. Delivery trucks are jamming up the downtowns, and it really is a problem countrywide. There are also opportunities to fulfill the complete streets commitment of the village. Complete streets are streets that take into consideration the needs of all people and modes, and that means that you're going to be balancing the needs of drivers with the needs of pedestrians, with the needs of bicyclists. It doesn't mean that every street is going to be designed the same way, but a complete street looks at the system and figures out how will those streets accommodate and what is the best design in order to make the streets accessible to everyone. Underinvestment in rail and bus infrastructure explore ways to improve layout, design, and circulation of cars, buses, and pedestrians in the downtown. But also we'll be looking at the entire, where we can address these things throughout the entire village. But there'll be a special focus on the downtown area. And again, COVID-19, there may have been places where you had streets closed or activities happening in the streets. Across the country, there were all kinds of things that people did to make it possible to interact. And I think that we need to find out more about what exactly happened here, and maybe there's some ideas there that could transfer to our recommendations. So I'm going to turn it over to Rachna. Oh, okay. Well, I was going to turn it over to Rachna, but based on what I said, these are the topics that you're going to see in the circulation element. And again, we're looking at the infrastructure itself, that's sidewalks and roadways. We're looking at parking, access to transit, where are the stations, where are the buses, and so forth. Smart streets and technology, new things that are coming down the pike that will give new solutions to old problems. Complete and green streets. The green streets part of it refers to stormwater management that's done in an environmentally sensitive way, and that helps to mitigate some of the problems with stormwater at the same time as it creates a better street environment for walking and biking. And then we'll look at bicycle paths and routes, pedestrian safety, trends, and much more. But I think the most important thing to understand is that this process is not about checking off what's in the municipal land use law. This process is really about tailoring it to your needs. So we're going to put our emphasis on where the problems that have been identified in the revisioning process, and also everything that comes up now, because it really is supposed to be, it's tailored. It's not a boilerplate effort. And I want to assure you that that's our intention, and we're going to listen to everything that we hear along the way. So there you go.
Thanks, Annette. So as part of the data collection process for the circulation element, we will be looking at previous plans and studies that were developed, including the Central Bergen Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan that NV5 prepared back in 2015 that had a focus on Ridgewood, identifying very specific bicycle and pedestrian improvements that can be undertaken. And, we look at what needs to be changed and revised there. The Senior Walkability Report, the Age-Friendly Ridgewood Report, and the Safe Routes to School design assistance that also NV5 is involved in, that's currently underway, and that is involves primarily sidewalk and crosswalk and intersection improvements along certain streets around the schools. We will ensure that the stakeholders involved in transportation and circulation, we have conversations with them about what are the big key issues in Ridgewood. Equity, we wanted to talk about how equity has become a big consideration in transportation planning and decision making over the last several years. The street infrastructure, which is sidewalks, the streets, all funded by tax dollars, should provide access to every person regardless of their age or their ability. As we look around, streets are primarily designed for cars, not so much for people who walk or bike or need to use a wheelchair or have a hearing disability or people with parents with a stroller. The street should be designed for everybody, and that's what Annette was saying about that's a complete street. And as we launch this master plan process, and we will ensure that we listen to all the different needs and address different needs in our plan. And the circulation element, as we develop it, we will provide options for input along the way for every user, and through different avenues. So The specific components of the circulation element, we will develop a unified vision for circulation and transportation, identify goals and strategies to actually achieve that vision. We will be mapping the existing conditions, the streets, roadway classification, bus route transit. We will also map where the crashes are occurring and identify hotspots so that we can identify recommendations and improvements to those intersections. There will be a focus, as part of the downtown element, focus on circulation as well. What the circulation element will not include, we will not be conducting any new traffic counts or develop traffic models or make engineering plans. There will be planning level concepts that the town can then advance as they go ahead. With that, I will pass it on to John.
Thanks. So our next element is certainly related to the previous two that we've discussed. It's really in the terms of its definition in the municipal land use law, it's an economic development element. In the context of Ridgewood, really it becomes a downtown plan as much as anything. We do have a few other pockets of commercial areas throughout town. We have a little bit of the Route 17 corridor, little pocket of commercial areas on North Maple and right on the edge of Hawthorne. But primarily, when we think of economic development, when we think of commercial activity, when we think of activity in Ridgewood, we're talking about downtown. So that's going to be primarily our focus. The municipal land use law defines its purpose as to promote economic development and sustained economic vitality, and it'll include an analysis of stability and diversity of the economic development to be promoted. So we'll look at types of businesses that are in town, identify where there may be some gaps, take a look, as I said, with the land use element, and it may sound like we're repeating ourselves, but that is part of the point, is that there is this constant back and forth between the different elements. We'll be looking at the zoning and how it may impact what happens downtown, types of businesses that can come in. One of the great things about small businesses and entrepreneurs is that they're always coming up with new ideas. One of the hard things about zoning codes is that they change very slowly, if at all. So there's oftentimes people have really great ideas, cutting edge things that they want to do that would be a great fit downtown, that would be a great fit anywhere. But unfortunately, they are stuck because the zoning doesn't allow it, and they have to spend time and money going through a process where everyone agrees it's a good idea, but we still have to go through the process. So we're going to look at some of the ways where we can potentially bring down barriers like that and encourage some new and exciting activity after we decide where some of those things may be. Some of the concepts that came out of the vision plan that we want to use, keep in the back of our minds, guide us, maintain the aesthetic quality feeling of downtown. I can absolutely vouch for that. It's a wonderful, wonderful downtown. So we're not looking to reinvent the wheel here, but we do want to make sure that the downtown has the tools, that business owners, entrepreneurs have the tools that they need, and that the village continues to have a downtown that it can be proud of, even as things change and we adapt to our new future. Create a safe environment for pedestrians of all ages. We just heard a lot about complete streets and in the circulation element. Again, that back and forth, that's going to be an important focus because I think our experience over the last 18 months with the pandemic has shown us the value of having places where we can go be outside. Some of the adaptations that we've been forced to undertake provide a proof of concept. We can understand things that may have worked well, things that may not have worked well. We'd love to hear from you, your opinions on those things. So, moving forward, what can we take with us from this experience? Improving communication between downtown interests, stakeholders, and residents. That's part of our governance and transparency conversation, and just overall making sure that folks in town have the ability to have their voices heard, and that business owners, the business community downtown, has an outlet for their ideas, and that we can hopefully respond to them in a positive way. Considering alternatives that can reduce the need for parking. Parking is a hot button topic. It always is. I think everywhere I go, every meeting I attend, invariably we have a conversation one way or another about parking. So I'll start the conversation here tonight with that. Some of the specific recommendations, things that come out of the vision plan that I've already touched on. Looking at the zoning code. When some things that get outdated and don't get changed, but the master plan process is the time to make those recommendations, make those changes. Promoting a variety of retail types was one of the recommendations. There are a lot of great businesses downtown, and back to that conversation about what are new things that may be missing, we can identify some of those things and talk about how to promote them and make them happen. Create a mix of complementary, supportive uses that leads to an active downtown day and night. That's going to be an interesting topic as we see how things evolve with going back to the office, how big businesses treat their big office space in Manhattan. Do they start to look at breaking some of those spaces down and having satellite offices? Will there be a natural progression of people who are day-to-day in town more often than they would have been otherwise? Some of those forces are big picture things that are outside of our control, but monitoring them and understanding how we can put things into place to adapt to them, encouraging flexible office space, other small office spaces that may cater to people who work from home that just need to get out of the house. But how those things can encourage activity all day and into the evening. And then looking back into the circulation element, at least, looking at commercial loading and delivery policies. With deliveries, with the increases in e-commerce, there's a lot of competition for a little bit of curb space, especially when you have sidewalk eateries, you have parking, you have spaces where people can congregate. Then the truck needs to make a delivery. So figuring out the best, most efficient way that we can encourage and locate those things in a way that don't interfere with other activity. And as I said, looking at some of the lessons we're going to take with us from the COVID-19 pandemic and response to it. So we'll have a detailed evaluation of the existing commercial district, which we actually began this afternoon. I was out there with the clipboard, and McKinley had the camera, and we were literally going block by block, writing down all of the different businesses in the storefronts, and we'll put together an inventory, and then we'll do some outreach and talk to the businesses about their experience, what they need, what they think they could use some help improving, and identify what kind of businesses Ridgewood may need. And then look at how some of the demographics associated with the new residential developments downtown may lead to changing in demand for activity downtown. There are 3 fairly significant residential developments right downtown that you're all aware of. So that that activity that comes with those people may lead to new businesses and new activity, new desires. So overall, we're looking for a component of the master plan, but a really big picture. And I mentioned the idea of marketing in some ways before. This isn't a marketing study or a marketing document, but it would ideally be something that a business owner could be shown or could look at and say, hey, this place wants people to come downtown, this place wants businesses, this place has great ideas, that's where I want to be. So we're hoping to provide something that encourage that type of excitement. With that, I'll turn it over to McKinley to talk about green buildings and sustainability.
You guys still with us? Okay, I see some smiles, good. All right, so we're going to do a green building and environmental sustainability element. This is the newest element that the state legislature has decided should be considered for a master plan. It was first brought to light in 2008. We have seen a lot of these elements successfully implemented. It is an optional element, but it is a really good option to include, especially given what's happening with climate change. John did a visit here on September 3rd, just 2 days after Ida hit, so we are very aware of specific flooding issues, especially that the village experiences with these big storm events. So this is a very timely element to be looking into. So this element includes promotion and evaluation of all of these items we have listed up here. We're going to be looking at renewable energy sources and options for incorporating those throughout the village, commercial, residential, public, otherwise. Impacts of buildings on the local, regional, and global environment. Sustainability is really one of these buzzwords that we hear all the time, and it can be hard to define it. What we're really looking at is the interaction between environment, economics, and social needs of a community, and how those three aspects come together. Allowing ecosystems to function naturally, we don't want to disrupt them any more than we have to. Conserving and reuse of water, this has become a big one that we are seeing a lot of buildings incorporate different ways to reuse their water. LEED standards is one of the common building green standards that we see that has all sorts of standards, recommendations, guidelines in terms of how to incorporate these into building development and design. Treating stormwater on site is another one, as well as optimizing the climate conditions through site orientation and design. There's all sorts of best practices beyond just architecture and standard design. Engineering, site design, and the way you simply just orient a building, whether it's oriented towards the south or the north, can make all the difference from a sustainability perspective. So from your vision plan process, 4 broad concepts about sustainability came out. Creating a more sustainable community by implementing a sustainable strategy. That is what this entire element is really going to be about, a strategy that the village can use moving forward. Preparing for severe weather, climate change. And as I said, we've just experienced one of those 500-year storms are now 3-year storms. We are getting them all the time now. And so making that a key focus, that climate change and major storm events, is something that we intend to put at the forefront of this element. Striving to be proactive in community planning matters. This is something we've heard across the board, bringing in firsthand accounts and responses to what you have seen throughout the community and making sure that your voices and recommendations are heard throughout. Protecting and enhancing the tree canopy throughout the village. There was a comment earlier tonight about a shade tree commission. That's exactly the kind of thing that we hope to incorporate, those recommendations and desires. We hope to hear about those more and more. And what was said earlier about tree canopies and trees, broadly speaking, being an excellent fight against climate change. We see it over and over again, and they do prove to be successful. So we hope to look into that a little bit more and see what could come out of that. Specific components of this plan will include, as I mentioned, green building standards, ways to incorporate these into your ordinances, whether those be through recommendations or very specific requirements for especially the bigger developments that we see moving forward and moving into the village. Enhanced standards for stormwater management and flooding. There is a statewide stormwater management ordinance that all communities in the state adopt. The most recent one came out last year. Those are fantastic standards that we want to incorporate, but there are a lot of tools that go above and beyond those standards that we can add enhanced standards and recommendations into the village's policies. Standards for renewable energy facilities. The element will be looking into where these may be appropriate. I know solar panels is one that can be sort of a hot topic because so there can be issues with aesthetics, where they might be appropriate, where they might not be appropriate. That would just be one example. My screen just went away. There we go. And best practices and case studies. John and I are currently involved in a project called Resilient New Jersey, where we're working with 11 communities around the Raritan Bay and Hudson River areas that, just like Ridgewood, experience significant flooding. Through that, we have gathered a huge resource and database of what towns are already doing that are successful, what they hope to see, and the end result of that project will be more tools that we hope to bring in and bring our experience from that to Ridgewood. We want to hear what Ridgewood has already done in the past few years to combat issues with flooding and climate change, and where there are gaps in those initiatives and how we might be able to move those forward to make sure that the village is protected from these future storm events. The 3 smaller elements that John discussed early on were the utilities, community facilities, and recycling elements. As he mentioned, these are all basically looking at inventories of where everything stands, any ongoing projects that might be already underway, and any recommendations for what we might want to see in the future. For the utilities element, we're going to be looking at water supply, drainage, flood control, solid waste, sewage, water, and any other facilities that might be relevant to the village. The community facilities element, likewise, will be looking at existing and proposed locations, educational, historic, cultural libraries. The list goes on. We'll take an inventory of everything that's offered in the borough. Maybe there needs to be an addition to the senior center. Maybe that's too small. Maybe there needs to be more playgrounds that are outside of just the school system. You know, that's the kind of thing that we want to hear from you in terms of where improvements are needed. And the recycling element is the final small one. This element incorporates, the state actually has recycling plan goals, and so this element will incorporate the state's goals for that, and include discussion of collection, disposition and recycling of recyclable materials, where that stands within the municipal ordinance, as well as requirements for very large residential developments that come in and how recycling plays into those. I'm going to pass it back to John.
Okay, this is essentially the end of our presentation, so I hope everyone has lots of good questions and comments lined up to get us thinking as we move forward. So the next steps in the process, we're going to have 3 more of these work sessions. I believe tentatively we're talking about October, November, and then probably January for those 3 sessions. We'll firm those up and make sure that they're well advertised when we have the dates and times available. We'll be developing over the next month, well, before we come back again, we're going to be developing a lot of that background information we talked about. We'll get together the existing conditions and begin to hopefully take some time to think about what we hear this evening and come back with some initial thoughts on any comments that we may get. Over the next few months, we'll be putting together the draft documents. Each of the elements has its own form, function, but also it's one big document at the end of the day, so we'll be working on those chapters. The elements are really chapters. We'll be working on those, and then the overall plan document. We'll be back. That January work session may be an opportunity for a review of a draft or parts of drafts at that point, where we can start to refine, hone in, and then finishing things up in February, March, and moving toward that hearing for adoption, depending on scheduling, sometime probably in March, maybe even April, but that's our process. So it's a fairly condensed timeline, but because of all the work that's already been done, that you've already participated in with the vision plan, this is a continuation of a long process. You know, it shouldn't feel like it's being rushed because you've done a lot already. So that's what we have to say to you, and we'd love to hear what all of you have to say to us now. And hopefully the presentation has been informative, and we just want you to know that your input, your comments, your questions are very valuable. For anyone who's watching at home who's not here, like I said, you can sign up for updates on the project website at ridgewoodvillagemp.org. The .org is important because it's easy to forget. There's information there, there's updates regularly, and you can put in your email address and be on the list to receive those updates. For the folks who are in the room, we do have some comment cards, so if you don't want to speak this evening, or if you want to take one home with you and fill it out later, or fill it out online, those are available to you. They have as I mentioned earlier, I don't know if anybody joined late, but there is a QR code on there you can scan with your phone to jump you straight to the website. So I think that's where we stand, and I'd pass it back to the chairman and the board to lead us on.
Okay, thank you, John. Great presentation. We'll start off with question or comments by the board and the board professionals, and then we'll open it up to the public. So any board members have any questions for the master plan team? That's okay. All right. Sure. Go ahead, darling.
That's why I'm laughing. Great presentation. Thank you. You said something about floodplains. And I know that in my neighborhood, when it rains really hard, I believe, I've been told, because I've been here forever, that there was an underground spring that is underneath. In your research, have you found that there was one, and how do you plan to address that? Because rains like we received a couple of weeks ago, most of the people there, their basements were flooded, and it wasn't just happening then, it just happens consistently. So I'm just inquiring about that.
Yes, unfortunately, there are underground springs, and things were filled in over time that we wouldn't necessarily fill in today. So there are some of those areas that are particularly susceptible. I'd love to get the specifics of the location so we can do some research. We have mapping from FEMA, from the state, and we have additional modeling resources that have come out to show where floods are likely to happen. Some of the weaknesses in those models tend to be areas that may not be right near the water, but may experience some of those groundwater issues or have other, so the more specific local knowledge that we can obtain on that, the better we can help tailor our recommendations, maybe identify an area that doesn't show up on a map or isn't properly mapped, and we can try and see about correcting some of those issues. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
I just had a quick question on the sustainability part that you were talking about. So we're looking at both residents and businesses, correct, in our downtown. So I love the idea that you're putting together kind of a marketing document on why you want to do business in Ridgewood and what our downtown looks like, and can't wait to see the mix that comes out of the public comment as well as what you guys discover. But I just wanted to make sure there's an element within businesses that are requiring businesses to recycle and things like that as well. So it's not just on the consumer side, it's when you go into to do business in Ridgewood, you have to recycle. I think that's a really important part in kind of keeping up with everything that we're trying to do.
Yeah, that's a really good comment, and yeah, it will be focused, just to enforce what you just said, yes, it will be residential and commercial that will be looked at and be included in that recommendation or requirement as it is. Yep.
Because when you go into businesses and you can't recycle and you leave your glass on top of the trash because you want it to be, even you see young kids doing it, it says something. So, and it's not just here, it's other places as well, but I think that should be included.
It speaks to your residents for wanting
right.
to recycle even if they don't have
And
the option.
Thanks.
Thanks. Hi, thank you for your presentation. I'm just curious, I'm very interested in having more bike routes or bike trails, but I mean, we seem to be pretty much built out. Like, what have you done in other towns? Like, what do you think the recommendations would be? How do you create something out of what seems to be nothing available to create?
I know what you mean about when you're built out and you have everything in place. It doesn't seem like it's possible to really make any substantive changes. But there's actually a lot of newer ideas and Okay, is this good?
Thank you.
There actually are both policy and infrastructure ideas that might apply, that new ideas that are coming forth. And let me give you an example. Well, the fact that a lot of places closed some streets off and allowed pedestrians to have full reign. Maybe they only did it for certain time periods, and there are precedents around the country of figuring out different ways of programming the use of public space, even streets. So slow streets and that was apparently something that came up a lot in the vision plan, the idea of making some pedestrian-only streets and looking at things like that. So we're going to look at some of those new ideas and see how they might be applied. And the only other thing I wanted to say is about protected streets. Mostly when you talk about bike facilities, the first thing that people think of is bike lanes, and there's a lot of controversy about that, and I know that there's been a lot of discussion here. But actually, there is an effort nationally in the biking community to try to make protected bike lanes, which is a different approach to that infrastructure, so that you're actually putting some kind of a barrier between the lanes of traffic and the where the bikes are to go. So those are like examples of things that worth going back and taking a look at some of the ideas that came up before and to see how can we enhance them. So
and at the same time, it's not easy because you do have very limited right-of-way, and there's parking needs, there's cars, there's pedestrian and cyclists. So it comes down to prioritizing. And as a community, we would kind of need to identify what are the streets that we absolutely want some bicycle infrastructure, or what are the streets that it's okay to maybe have, shared lane markings, alert the motorists of potential cyclist behavior, so that when someone is driving down the street, they are aware that there could be cyclists on this road. So it's definitely not an easy decision to an easy solution there. We kind of have to work together to, it's a give and take.
Okay. Thank you.
So,
question for you. After the latest storm, we've seen a lot of flooding happening even in this area, and I just wanted to know about Hohokus Brook. A lot of areas got destroyed, and now a lot of fixing is happening. But what is it that's being done infrastructure-wise or in any other ways to prevent that from happening again? Not just simply fixing it up, because the next storm we're going to have, we might have been experiencing exactly the same thing. So I just want to have an open dialogue about what is actually being done on a more concrete level to make sure that these areas don't get flooded again.
So there are a lot of different tools that are possible. Some of them are easier than others. Some of them can be a big challenge. They require a lot of investment. They require a lot of will to undertake. McKinley mentioned the Resilient New Jersey project that we're part of working on right now. And as part of that and some other work that I've done, we've been spending a lot of time in Hoboken. Hoboken is small. It's all built out. It's at the water. A lot of it's below sea level, at or below sea level. It has regular nuisance flooding events. And when we talk about nuisance flooding, we're talking about where you get your street flooded out just from a regular old rainstorm, not a big named storm. And in coastal areas, a lot of times you may have a full moon and high tide and you get your streets flooded out regularly. So, once a month or every other month, you just have this nuisance. But some of Hoboken, in my experience, has been one of the most progressive places in the state in terms of trying to address some of those issues. They've put a lot of effort into what they call resiliency parks. They involve huge infrastructure, big underground storage tanks, essentially, that retain that water and then allow it to flow out slowly. That's what stormwater management is, essentially. But from the surface, you wouldn't know they were there. It would look like a park, a field, etc. But underneath, there would be all this infrastructure that instead of the rain hitting that and pooling and accumulating and running off, it would be absorbed, it would be held, and then it would be slowly released so that it gives you more capacity to take on that water. That's an extreme example. That's a big ticket, big picture item. It's possible. There are other smaller interventions. Some of the green streets ideas that Annette and Rachna touched on in their presentation. Small things here and there add up to big benefits. Adding permeable paving, adding green bump outs and things like that can help, instead of all the water hitting pavement and running off or running into the storm sewers that then overflow, it gets absorbed and can be retained and held naturally or with a design system. A lot of this is, the specifics of this is engineering that's beyond me, but the concepts are kind of the same. It's how do you prevent all that water from just accumulating? So there are different interventions that we can recommend in terms of zoning ordinance updates. Some of the green building strategies where you mandate reductions in impervious coverage, or you have green roofs where instead of the roof of the building creating runoff, the roof of the building can absorb some of that water. There are a lot of tools out there. They're not one-size-fits-all applications, and there's a lot of different scale in terms of approach. But we can come up with a lot of different recommendations and hopefully things that can help.
Any other questions? Any questions?
Well, I just actually have an observation, but first, thank you for an incredibly thorough presentation. I just wanted to say the downtown economic development element was so kind of a little surprise when we got through this phase of being introduced to your group, and this was something that you had added in to your RFP. And it's interesting because I think the downtown economic development element and the sustainability and the green infrastructure are so connected that the more green infrastructure we can put into our downtown, the more sustainable it is, the more attractive it is. But I think this is such a critical piece given the ease that people have just picking up the phone or hitting a button on Amazon, and I'm not picking on Amazon, but any of those online retailers. And I think this is so critical, and I wonder, have you had any experience in, or if you could share with us an experience where that has been countered and the green infrastructure has actually encouraged more downtown foot traffic, pedestrian traffic, and what ideas would be implemented to overcome those online type retailers that are really just chipping away at the bricks and mortar?
So I think that's the big downtown economic development challenge is how do you create an experience that you can't replicate by just clicking a button on your phone or on the computer, And there are certain goods that, frankly, you can't get downtown because it's so much cheaper to have them shipped to your door. And before it may have been cheaper to go to Target or Walmart, and now it's Amazon. So that evolution has been going on, and I think we've been through that process in some ways and some reinventions in response to the big box stores. So it's taken on a little different element with online ordering, but it's a similar concept. So it's how is downtown a place that you can't replicate anywhere else? You have to be there. You have to go there. As far as the green infrastructure, the intersection with that, I think it's just, if you think about pleasant places, just think of any pleasant place that you may want to be, and shade trees and benches and things that are not just pavement, that are not just the hot sun beating down on you, reflecting back up off the asphalt, where you're out there, you're doing things that you can't do anywhere else, and integrating some of those green concepts have that dual benefit. They provide pleasant places to be while also contributing to resiliency and stormwater management. That's existing things like Van Ness Park and future things that will come about to soften the edges around different streets here and there and make a little plaza or a little pocket park where there wasn't one before, and they become gathering spaces and people go there to gather and then they shop and dine and off you go.
Thank you.
And just to add a little bit to that, I've been doing research into this, and there's a kind of new renaissance into these sustainable building. LEED standards have been around for a very long time, but I'm seeing recently there's a lot more interest in pursuing it. You cannot necessarily require it, but I've read market studies done on a broader context, not really an individual town, but that buildings that meet LEED or similar green standards find that their marketability of their physical spaces are much higher. And there is now hard data that supports that. So those kind of initiatives, and like John said, that is the kind of thing that makes something unique. A landlord being able to say, hey, we're LEED silver or LEED gold, come set up your shop here. Little tiny stores that wouldn't be able to do something like that on their own, but could lease the space and benefit from not having to pay such a high water bill, those kind of things. So while I don't have a specific town example, we're starting to see those numbers come out on a broader scale, and that's across the country. So those are the kind of things that we are investigating more and hope to incorporate here as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Do our board professionals have any questions?
Yes, I may. Could you please confirm, I always had the understanding that the stormwater protection regulations by the DEP had to be a separate, distinct element in a master plan.
Yeah, that is correct. There's a stormwater management plan, and I believe.
And how are you going to incorporate it in what you propose?
I believe the village adopted an updated stormwater management plan element recently. I don't know the date exactly.
We adopted the latest and greatest DEP mandated flood protection ordinance. That was earlier this year.
Right, and also within the last year or two, a new stormwater management plan, correct?
That doesn't ring a bell. It's just that I'm looking at it just as an element of the master plan.
Correct. I thought I saw one on the website. If I'm mistaken, I will double check that.
All right. Nothing else. Thank you.
Mary Ann, any questions?
At this point, I think it's so preliminary, I think I'll hold my questions to the next meeting.
Okay, sure. All right, I'm going to open it up to the public. So if you have a question or a comment, you can come up to the lectern, state your name and address, and then you can ask questions or make a comment.
Nancy Brennan Hill, 136 Doremus Avenue, Ridgewood. I'm just wondering, in view of the proposal that Susan has made for a garden in the middle of Ridgewood, if you folks have had an opportunity to see how perhaps that idea could be expanded upon and truly make Ridgewood unique. I think of the High Line in New York City and how that changed a whole neighborhood, and it seems to me this could be the start of something really terrific for Ridgewood.
That's a good point to bring up, and we are all, as you can see, scribbling that down. And I think working with the group that will be doing the open space plan, that will be, I'm sure, key in theirs. But we do hope to kind of look into that a little bit more. We've only just heard it as a proposal. We don't know the specifics of it quite yet. But absolutely, we would like to move forward and incorporate that into our work here and our coordination with the open space group.
My name is Yusan. I lived in 420 Racetrack Road. And I have some comments. So first of all, I am one of the Open Space Committee member. And so we just updated a open space website, which included a lot of the new pictures, which were used to be in the thumb drive, in the park and recreation, computer. So it's available on the Village website. So if you guys have a chance, feel free to take a look. And also in terms of the master plan for the open space. So what my feeling is, with everything we do with the affordable housing, more apartments building comes up. If you look at, outdoor, just right outside the village hall, every afternoon there's so many kids. It's packed right now, especially with the COVID, and people are commute less to the New York City. I think there's an urge and need for us to build more open space facilities in terms of maybe playgrounds or more benches, for the citizens, because I think we're expecting more and more residents and population growth in the near future. I think that's something I want the planning board to be considered with. And second, I have a comment with the storm. So me personally, I work for PSE&G, and I worked in Manville for 3-4 days, where it's in central New Jersey, which were heavily impacted by the storm Ida. There is a place called Lost Valley. They were completely doomed. So the president was there one day. So what I learned, experience from them is throughout the years, they've been begging to have somebody or the government to clean up the riverbank. Because throughout the flood for the past years, the riverbank, just all the mud and soil just concentrated and saturated over there, and nobody cleans it up. I think maybe that's one thing we might want to look at it in the rivers around in the Ridgewood, and also I think it's important for the public to be aware of those emergency preparedness. Because I think the village could introduce or have some initiative to help people understand the emergency preparedness, and maybe even like a sandbag is a classic way, and I think it's very effective. Maybe by helping them, so it can reduce a lot of the damages and loss to the house. So that's all my comment. Thank you.
Good evening. Bob Upton, 172 West Glen Avenue. I understand that the Land Conservancy, in addition to developing the open space plan, is also going to be developing an environmental resource inventory. And we just wonder, environmental resource inventory obviously is an inventory. It's not a plan in itself. And I wonder what your experience has been as incorporating environmental resource inventories into sustainability elements. To what extent does that help you? And how might it be used?
So natural resource inventories are a really great tool, and you're correct, they are just that. They're inventories. It's a data set. It's an index of soils, water, endangered species is what I meant to say, where those species are located. It is a really good resource. So while that will be a component of the open space plan, we certainly do hope to be able to use that, especially as you said, with the sustainability plan. And John mentioned early on that all of these elements really do cross-reference each other. So when we're talking about things like those endangered species or where certain soils are that maybe aren't quite appropriate to build on because they have poor drainage, et cetera, we want to make sure that we get that information from them so that we can integrate it into all of the elements. But as you were speaking specifically, there's absolutely a place for all of that in the sustainability element. They will complement each other very well.
And one other, the environmental resource inventory can be a useful tool to inform when you're looking at development impacts. And so it may not necessarily be something specific to the master plan, but when requiring an environmental review of a project that is moving forward, the environmental resource inventory provides the basis for that often. So, if the recommendation that may come out of the master plan is to require a certain level of review for a certain type of project, then the environmental resource inventory is crucial to that process.
Good evening. Cynthia Hallaby, 1 Franklin Avenue. I have a question about aging in place, and I would like to check back with you to see what you have positioned there. I feel I'm a prime example. I have moved from a house of being there for 51 years into an apartment, and I hope to be able to stay there for a while, but I have to think about my future and where I'm going to continue aging in place. So I remember a few years ago there was a company that made a presentation to the council, and they were dismissed very rapidly without much discussion. And I would just hope that something like that would be investigated more, because I know there are companies who would be interested in supplying Ridgewood with assisted living. And on a totally different, well, slightly similar tone, I am aging in place, and I am having great trouble reading these screens. We have mentioned it to the council before, that the writing is far too small, that we need bigger screens. I would invite everybody here to come down and look at these screens when there is a lot of lettering and see if you can see from back there what we should be reading, which you can read on your computers. So I don't know, maybe I'm the only one who has trouble reading, but I would heartily recommend the next time you do some budget expenses to include some larger screens.
Yeah, I'm just actually going to add to that. I think just up until the few years ago when we installed these monitors, we had the pleasure of seeing a roll-up screen and a projector, and so this is a vast improvement over what we had. But I think at the time these were the biggest screens we could get, and we certainly, I agree. At the time I think I was asking for screens to fill the wall. So I agree. I am visually impaired, so I agree.
Will you be posting that on the website?
Yeah, I was just going to say this will be posted on the dedicated master plan website, but we're also sending it to the mayor and chairman, and we'll make sure that it gets on the village's main website. So if we apologize if you couldn't read some of it today, you will be able to, yeah. Well, it's excellent bedtime reading. It'll put you right to sleep. So that'll be posted. In response to your other concerns about aging in place, that's a topic we are seeing across New Jersey, especially as the baby boomers are aging into that category. And people want to stay in their homes. They don't want to have to move. That's actually why my grandparents left Ridgewood, is they lived on Hope Street, and it had many steps to get in. It was a 3-story house, and they just couldn't do it anymore. So we are working actually right now specifically in New Providence Borough to come up with ways, really that project is specific to ordinance changes that will allow, for example, ramps that might be infringing onto setbacks, where that might be appropriate, but as a way to work with both the needs of the residents that want to stay there and the desires of the community to maintain their setbacks. Those are the types of issues and conflicts that we're reviewing as we speak in that community. So we hope to take that example as well as efforts that we've seen across the state and review them in relevance to Ridgewood and see what is appropriate for the community here, because it is a big concern, and we are seeing it everywhere.
Good evening. Yeah, great presentation. And Cynthia, you're not the only one. And I saw somebody taking pictures of the things. It was an excellent presentation. I really thank you all. I just wonder, in your housing element, have you considered accessory apartments, which were in Ridgewood during World War II, to help the young veterans come back, young teachers? And there are, I think, almost 100 of them in existence in Ridgewood. I'm not exactly sure. At one point, there was a big effort to have accessory apartments. And these are, you're familiar with them there. They have a separate entrance, all that kind of stuff. And it would be, a really great way to have young people, singles or whoever, be able to help the homeowner by creating a rental situation and enjoy still living in Ridgewood. Thank you.
That is a topic that I think is coming a little bit more into prominence. It's something that came up in the vision plan process. It was touched on quite briefly this evening. I know of a couple of towns throughout the state that have recently gone through a big process to put new ordinances into place to allow accessory dwelling units. It is kind of an old concept, whether in a big house with a servant's quarters or a carriage house or things like that, depending on where you are. There's all sorts of examples that what's old is new again. But there are ways there are concerns about it in some levels, but I think that it's an interesting tool, and I think it's something that we need to look into, and there are ways I think that it could be very beneficial. So it's an interesting topic that's got more and more application recently, and we have some good examples to look to.
Good evening. Justin Manger, 590 Cliff Street. Very encouraging to see so much talk about the sustainability part of this plan. I think it's environmental, social, and economic, right? So we get all those components together. Really makes a difference, and like to see it. It could be another 40 years before we get a chance to really look at Ridgewood. I've only been here about 3 or 4 years, so still relatively new to the community, but do love living here and want to see it improve. On that note, just a couple comments and one question. I definitely think permeable surfaces would be something to look at. Obviously, the flooding that has taken place, whether it's parking lots or storage tanks for businesses, rainwater, that kind of thing, it may reduce some of the flooding, but could also help recharge the wells, I'm assuming, if more percolates down into the groundwater. Another environmental note, the EV boom is here. A lot more electric cars are on the roads, and I just want to make sure that we have EV charging somewhere. I know the new parking garage has at least 4 spots that I've seen, and there was a plan to put one here in the village parking lot. I think that got derailed because of COVID or flooding concerns or costs. But would like to see that as a key element. They're just going to be more and more EVs, and people need a place to charge. There was a comment made earlier about parks, especially in a built-out town, fairly built-out town. Where do we put a park? We can reuse some of the land that is currently not being used. North Maple was also mentioned, I think, as one of the smaller economic areas, business areas in town. Just before you get into Hohokus, there's a whole side of the street. I think it's Valley Hospital property, perhaps, but they have that new building, a new hospital that's going over. So I don't know what we can do there, but it's been abandoned. They were doing asbestos remediation, it looked like at one point, but there's a whole strip that could be a park, could be basketball courts, could be condos, something besides concrete and deteriorating buildings. And then I was just the question is, with all your work on master plans throughout the state, is there a good template or a well-written and well-thought-out master plan that they have a link somewhere we could get a public look at it to see what a good one looks like? Thank you.
Why, yes, we have prepared several. They're great templates. If you visit the master plan dedicated webpage under reports, the first line item, or I'm sorry, the second line item will be, oh no, I'm getting that backwards now. I apologize. Under the frequently asked questions, number 1, there is a link to 2 master plans that our firm has prepared, one for the city of South Amboy and the other for Atlantic County. The city of South Amboy is probably more relevant, even though it's a much smaller community than Ridgewood. It is a municipality as opposed to a county, although the county one will give you a good idea from a more regional perspective. But so let me repeat that it's under the frequently asked questions tab, number 1. There are 2 links there.
I just wanted to add to that because I'm so happy to see the 1983 plan up.
And that's what I
just pulled it up now. So if you just want to, for the purpose of comparison, Justin, if you go to the FAQ, you have the link to the 2 sample plans, which are actually Atlantic County and which was the other one?
South Amboy.
And then is it projects or plans folder?
Yeah, so this is where I mixed it up. Under the tab that is called reports, the first item on that one is the link to the village's 1983 master plan, which was the last comprehensive master plan that the village prepared. So it is really fun to look at it and see, for one thing, it was done on a typewriter, but also to see how things have changed since that time.
Yeah, I actually strongly encourage everyone to take a look at this, the old plan, the 1983 plan. It's fascinating.
Good evening. Pamela Perrin, 123 Kenilworth Road. Will the master plan address known sites of soil or water contamination or suspected sites of contamination? And will it address suggestions for remediation?
We can easily provide information on the known contaminated sites as they're identified by the DEP, and that'll be an element in the land use plan. As to suspected contamination, that's probably outside of this project's purview. If you have a specific property in mind that you want us to do some research on, I could look into it, but I can't necessarily say that we'd be able to identify anything. It's really not, that level of detail, the level of investigation that needs to go on is not something that's part of the master plan process, because it is really a site-specific thing that requires a lot of on-site due diligence.
Hi again, Amanda Pye, 690 Ellington Road. Thank you for your presentation. It was really great. Taller person was up here besides me. I just wanted to say again with the recycling, I agree with that there should be next to the garbages like recycling containers, because I do know a lot of people have water bottles that they're using and other, cans or whatever it might be, and there's sometimes where people are hesitant to even throw the trash in the garbage because they want the accessibility to recycle. So just from that standpoint, also on recycling materials, and this is more of like a zoning issue. So when construction is being done, there's certain zoning regulations, and things can be rehabilitated and saved, but due to a variance, once again, which we had discussed before, being an issue, so there is a zoning ordinance where you can't, or you can only build X amount of square feet on the first 149-foot line. So if your lot is large enough, you can push back beyond the 149-foot line, excuse me. However, an example of that would be taking a pre-existing two-car garage and wanting to add that square footage. Let's say it makes up 300 square feet for argument's sake, and you want to add that to your home. If your lot is large enough, the ordinance states that you can knock down that garage and then rebuild that structure 149 feet past. So from a recycling perspective and rebuilding perspective, in theory, if your lot is that same size and you can build it, it shouldn't really matter if it's 149 feet back or if it's within the 149 feet, if it makes sense to the lot size. I don't know if that made any sense. It did make sense? Okay, good. So from a recycling and zoning perspective, I think with the master plan, maybe that can be looked at, because otherwise you're knocking down something that is perfectly good and maybe just needs new siding or paint. And just because you want to be able to do the addition to your home when your lot is already able to accommodate that. It's just where it's located on the lot, which I guess goes back to the grandfathering in of where certain things are. I hope that made sense. Okay, thank you.
John Saraceno, 17 Coventry Court. I'm a commercial property owner in town as well, so it's something we deal with all the time, and you mentioned it earlier, which is the numerous zones downtown. And I think one of the things that is imperative with regard to the economic development side of this is, the view we have today is a very restrictive code. If it's not otherwise permitted, it's assumed to be prohibited. And an inclusive zone would free up the zoning officer, would make the process of approving a variety of uses easier. And in an ever-changing economic environment and the type of tenants that are going to occupy the downtown, if 1983 was the next one, 40 years from now, it'll be a little bit different. Let's hope it doesn't take 40 years to do the next one, but I wouldn't be surprised. So in light of that, I think it's something you really have to consider, because to your point, the small business operator, which is always what Ridgewood's downtown's going to be, it's not going to be nationals, don't have the time or patience or the money to go through a process of zoning and variance analysis all the time.
Paul Vangianos, 280 Rivera Court. Just to follow up with John Saraceno's point, it was only a few years ago that this strange concept came in. Somebody wanted to open something called a frozen yogurt shop, and it wasn't included in the permitted uses. If something that basic isn't included, then I think John's point is really well taken, that we need to keep this open for even more varied ideas than frozen yogurt. So I just brought that as an example. Thank you.
Rorik Hallaby, 1 Franklin Avenue. I'm disappointed Ms. Knudsen isn't here because her answer, her answer to my wife's point was a bit of a leaky roof is better than no roof. Yeah, that's true. But you know something? It's high time we patch the roof. And this idea that this is the biggest that was available just doesn't make sense. They're available in much bigger sizes. It's time we do it. Because to me, looking at a screen like this and not being able to read it, there's nothing transparent about that. It is the ultimate definition of opaqueness. Ma'am, and please don't shake your head. Okay?
I'm
now,
listening to your comment, and
Yes.
I'm just disagree with
Now-
you, respectfully disagree.
yes, but
It's unfortunate that we come to this meeting as a community to have a community engagement, a community involvement.
Madam, it's my
to
time to
better our-
speak.
That's all right.
It's my time to
better our
speak.
community, and
It
we
is my
must
time to
reduce
speak.
it to this
It is my
level.
time to speak. Please
don't
let me
reduce
finish.
this wonderful
Now, the question I
opportunity
have for
to
the
denigrate this
Madam, you are interrupting
community
me.
Conversation.
Madam,
It's
you are
terrible.
interrupting me.
Terrible.
You are interrupting me and you're being very rude.
Keep talking.
I don't need your permission to keep talking. I'm here to talk. Now, let me ask these people a question. What happens at the end of the process? Do you just turn over a nice leather-bound copy of the master plan, which sits on someone's shelf, or will you help implement the plan? A silly example, my wife and I are so happy to have moved into this lovely apartment in town after 50 years of living in a house. And I like to walk. Now, every time I walk around Ridgewood, I'm taking my life into my hands. Franklin Avenue is something out of, I won't even say. I mean, it's just an awful, awful street. And in fact, every time I cross it, I keep on thinking I should have my hiking staff with me. It's that bad. Also, I heard some mention about intelligent lights. I used to, before I retired at the young age of 78, I used to go to Europe quite a bit. And boy, did they have some beautiful lights where you'd approach the lights. If there were no cars coming, the lights changed for you to cross. Right now, every time I cross Franklin Avenue, I almost cross myself and pray and then cross, even though I'm going with the light. And then I keep on hearing, you're blaming it on the county, blaming it on the county. It's high time this town does something about it, if you will. And then lastly, the point I'd like to make is when you come up with these nice words about limiting further high-density residential developments and how the visual impact of new developments on the character and feeling of downtown needs to be assessed. Having lived here for 52 years, I can tell you the 3 apartment buildings that have come up, I would say by any measure, are a great improvement over these horrible, boarded up, circa 1950 car dealerships. So the point, and when I talk about governance, if you will, it is so important, this is why I keep on talking about that, is for the village to be governed by people who help the village cope with change. Because guess what? Things will continue changing. Things will continue changing. Things will never be the same. And you cannot fight change. You have to work with change. And as one expression I've used before, which is to soak Ridgewood in formaldehyde, there's no way to preserve it. You have to renew Ridgewood to preserve it, if you will. So my point is, I do hope, I mean, you're 4 very, very bright people, well-spoken, and we need you to help with implementation, because once the thing is over, we'll go back to the bad old days. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have 3 questions. I'll try to start with the implementation one, then I'll pass the lights off to Annette and Rachna. As to implementation, that is the next step. This plan will include recommendations that can be implemented. We are here for the plan. I'm not sure where we will be after the plan is adopted. You have a very capable planner who works with the village directly. It may be her role to take some of these recommendations to the next step. Ultimately, the governing body are the ones who need to sign off on the laws. So we can make the recommendations, we can put all of the ideas in place, but we are not the ones who are able to ultimately implement them. It's not the power given to us. For the smart lights question?
Yeah, no, that is a good recommendation, and it is typically something that you can utilize in specific intersections. You wouldn't do it everywhere because it can be very distracting. If there's a lot of pedestrian activity in those areas, it might not be a good idea to have that. But yes, lighting is a key component of improving pedestrian and cyclist safety. And it doesn't have to be the intelligent lights, but just some amount of lighting can definitely help there. So that's a good point.
And then the third question about, there was a lot of discussion in the vision plan about density, about residential development. It's something that we need to continue to look at as a balance, and as we evaluate the vitality of downtown and where there may be underutilized properties, what recommendations we can make about the best future for those properties. We're not coming in with the answer right now. I'd like to keep an open mind about it, and I hope that during our process that we can talk about different options.
Hi, Carolyn Jacoby, 160 Godwin Avenue. Thank you so much. It's so exciting. My heart is racing. I don't know if I'll be here 70 years like Nancy, but we're not going anywhere yet. And what I found so interesting, and I was thinking about this, that from 1983 to now, we're doing another master plan. Is in 10 years, there will be technological changes that we cannot even imagine now. So that to make this a document that is a living, breathing document, more to Paul's statement about allowing zoning to help to modify those changes, so we don't have to crack as opposed to being able to flow with all of these things that we know won't change unless we do something to remediate it. Will be the heat island that we have downtown now. And as a member of the Shade Tree Commission, I'm so excited to know that you will be reaching out to the Shade Tree Commission because we are in the process of developing another 5-year community forestry management plan, and we should be working together with that as we will be moving forward and where our resources are going to go, because we know we need to do things now. but we know we will continue to be needing to do things. Trees are a living organism, as is this plan. It needs to be. So thank you again for all your efforts. Thank you, everybody here. And what do you think, Nancy? Another 70 years? Or am I?
Sheila Brogan, 302 Kensington Drive. Thank you to the Planning Board for this opportunity. Really appreciate it. So excited. So thank you for this. A couple of things. I co-chair Age-Friendly Ridgewood, so wow. I'm glad that our reports are part of this. And we do work with other communities, New Providence, other age-friendly, other communities that have been working on age-friendly. And so housing is an issue for all these communities, and the importance of that intergenerational community where everybody is welcome. And as you make improvements for any group, whether it's pedestrian safety, you really improve the town for everyone, or bicycling or whatever it is. So that aspect of the housing element and how affordability and access and equity are so important to that. So the other is our situation with water management and flooding, and I really would love to hear as you progress, what are those options that are available? Because there are, as you know, a community group that wants to actually look at that and see, what are our options. So that's exciting. But wow, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Can I, while we just have this little break, can I just circle back to that stormwater management plan that Chris raised? So I think John's referring to the plan on the website that was updated December 29th, proposed revision on December 29th, 2020. Is that what you're referring to? That plan? And it's the... it's our stormwater management plan.
Yeah, that's a plan we prepared for the village.
Right.
That, as you are correct in saying, that's an update. We had to update the previous one. First one I wrote, I think, was in 2005.
Right. I see the revision dates.
Yeah, okay, it does have the revision dates on it. And that periodically has to be updated to satisfy DEP. The stormwater element of the master plan is something the village adopted about 6-8 years ago, I believe. I'm not quite sure exactly when, but it was a separate standalone element of the master plan.
So, and I thought that is somewhere on the website, I believe, correct?
It might be or should be, but it would be within the existing master plan.
Right. So is that what you're referring to, John? Because I know I was on the planning board when we adopted that
I think it's 6 or 8 years ago. Again,
yeah.
My memory's rusty.
Right. So there's originally adopted 2005. It's been amended. The revision date is December 2020.
It has a proposed revision date, December 29th.
No, that's just the stormwater plan that we're required by DEP.
Right, okay.
That's separate and distinct of the master plan stormwater element.
Okay. We'll coordinate. We'll make sure that we integrate what we need to integrate.
I'll see what I have and email it to you.
Okay. Thank you.
And, okay, because somewhere that element, we have that element. I guess I have it right in front of me, probably. But no, I just realized.
I have it. It's separate, a whole separate, its own separate book. I don't have it with me, but I do have it.
I know, we do have a separate.
Yeah.
Okay, but we'll get it in a,
Right.
but we can get that in a PDF, right, Chris?
Hmm?
We have that in a PDF for,
If we don't, we can create a PDF.
okay. All right, good, thank you.
Okay, any more public comment or questions? once, going twice. Okay, gonna close. Did you have? Okay. All right. Any more questions, board professionals?
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, sure.
Nothing substantive, but in light of the issues with the screens, can I just suggest your next presentation double the font size?
Yeah.
Save
Now
a few
we know.
$1,000s for the village, just make it bigger. Thank you.
Our next presentation. Fewer words, more pictures, we promise.
Okay. All right, so that'll conclude Phase 2 Master Plan, the first kickoff meeting with respect to it.
So just real quick, so we're going to update the website, and if everyone that was present today and everyone out in the public, if they're registered, they would receive updates as to when the next meetings. Will they automatically receive those updates?
So if you're already registered, you're in our system. If tonight was the first night you gave us your email, we'll make sure we put you in the system. And every time we post something new on the website, you will get a notification. We will not be posting too often so as to not clog up your email, but whenever something happens, you will be notified of it. There's an unsubscribe button if you choose not to, but yes, everything will come to you via email.
Okay, I guess we should schedule the next meeting for this. Did you have a certain date that you wanted for the next meeting?
I think our internal plan, and I believe that we discussed it, was for your second October meeting. If that works with the schedule, is that the 19th?
Yeah, I think so. That would be good.
So if we could plan on that, that would work for us.
Okay, so the next meeting for the Phase 2 of the master plan will be October 19th, 2021. Also, check the website for everything relating to the master plan project going on. There's a ton of information on it, so you can review all the resources on it. You can review the PowerPoint, and there'll be more questions, comments, and more testimony and more work on the master plan, so stay tuned.
And thank you, everyone, for coming tonight.
Yeah.
So exciting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, I appreciate that. What else do we have? We're done.
It's in the executive session. We need it?
Do we have an executive?
Yeah? Okay. Okay, yeah, I would just give, we have an executive, so you can go.